Do it. Subcommittee will come to order. First of all and foremost, my heart goes out to Taiwan as it deals with the aftermath of the shocking magnitude 6.4 earthquake on February 6th that claimed 63 lives and injured 551. And that was in the city of Tainan, where I lived for 7 months. And I have a really special place in my heart for the people of Tainan. I'm so saddened to hear about the damage that the earthquake wreaked. And I know I'm joined with my colleagues of the subcommittee in continuing to support Taiwan in this difficult time. Today, we celebrate Taiwan's democracy, given its recent presidential and parliamentary elections in January. In this regional context, Taiwan's free and fair elections, vibrant free market economy, and open society definitely set an example for the region and for the world. With the Democratic Progressive Party DPP victory, the party has won its first ever absolute majority in the Legislative Yuan, which has until now been controlled by the Kuomintang KMT. President-elect Tsai Ing-wen will also be Taiwan's first female president. I think that's pretty exciting. This third peaceful transfer of executive power is an indication of the maturation of Taiwan's democracy. The recent election presents the United States with more opportunities to improve our political, security, and economic relationship with Taiwan. We're here to parse out the priorities of President-elect Tsai's administration, understand the prospects and potential for the U.S. Taiwan and the cross-strait relationships, and to discuss how the United States can continue to honor our commitments to Taiwan. I look forward to hearing from our distinguished witnesses on these important issues. The cross-strait relationship has been relatively stable under the sitting Kuomintang President Ma Ying-jeou. President Ma took strides to build closer relationships with China, especially in trade. To his credit, President Ma negotiated the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement, ECFA, with China in 2010, and this paved the way for Taiwan's expanded trade ties under similar economic cooperation agreements with New Zealand and Singapore. The suspension on the Cross-Strait Trade and Services Agreement, TISA, as a result of domestic protests in 2014, may have indirectly contributed to China's tightening on further trade agreements between Taiwan and other countries. With slow economic development, untapped potential due to political constraints, and heavy reliance on trade, I look forward to hearing from our distinguished panels, especially our administration witness, about Taiwan's economic and trade prospects and how the United States can help Taiwan overcome some of these challenges. I also worry about the potential for cross-strait stability, as China has not hesitated to remind us that it's still willing to use military force against Taiwan. Of note, China continues to press President-elect Tsai and her administration to acknowledge the 1992 consensus, something President Ma has adhered to. President-elect Tsai will continue to face pressure here, given her party's own interpretation of the agreement. Despite her underscoring her intention to maintain the status quo and saying there won't be provocation and there won't be surprises, we cannot say the same for China. A steady stream of threats toward Taiwan's national security are an everyday reality for Taiwan and its people. And I hope our panels can shed light on how we can continue to support Taiwan's security under the Taiwan Relations Act and through increased cooperation. I admire outgoing President Ma and all that he was able to accomplish for Taiwan. I look forward to seeing how we can continue to work with President Tsai for the mutual benefit of the United States and Taiwan. Members of Congress have always shared a strong interest in supporting Taiwan's security and democracy. Having lived there for 2 years myself while serving a church mission, I am one of its big supporters, hopefully its biggest. In a time when Taiwan presence in the international arena is constantly being threatened, in a time when Taiwan's security is not assured from coercion and potential attacks, I urge our administration to continue to support Taiwan. We must prioritize Taiwan's active and meaningful participation on the global stage, ensure its self-defense capabilities are sufficient, and ensure that its economy continues to grow vibrantly and compete with other major powers in the region. Members present today are going to be permitted to submit written statements to be included in the official hearing record. Without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 5 calendar days to allow for statements, questions, and extraneous materials subject to the length limitation in the rules. And I'm going to recognize Chairman Royce and then Ranking Member Sherman.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Salmon. And let me first say, on behalf of our members here, we have all visited Tainan and been in Taiwan, and our hearts go out to the people of Taiwan, to the victims of this earthquake. 59 perished so far. Hundreds and hundreds have been injured, and there's a great knowledge here in the United States in terms of how much the Taiwanese go to the rescue with volunteers all over the world after international incidents, whenever an earthquake or some other disaster hits. And we saw how quickly the authorities, but also how quickly the volunteers rushed to the scene to begin to rescue people. So we've traveled, our committee together, since I've been chairman, have traveled 3 times now to Taiwan, and in the last 3 years. And we've visited Kaohsiung, and we have visited Tainan, as I mentioned, and Taipei, of course, and we're just devastated to see the destruction. But the American people stand by the Taiwanese people in their time of need, and we're ready to assist in any way we can. Taiwan is one of our most important friends to the U.S. In the Asia-Pacific, and I know that supporting Taiwan is a critical issue for members of the Foreign Affairs Committee. As chairman, I've made the strengthening of this relationship with Taiwan one of the committee's top priorities. I want to again congratulate the people of Taiwan for their free and fair elections last month. I think the U.S. and Taiwan share a very important commitment to democracy, to human rights, to the rule of law, and these values, I think, serve as a bedrock to the U.S. Taiwan relationship, and I think the election demonstrated the strength and vibrancy of Taiwan's democracy, their democratic system, hopefully serving as a model for other countries in the region. Last year, Chairman Salmon joined me, as I said, in the delegation where we spent some time in Taipei working to strengthen the U.S. Taiwan relationship. We met with the sitting president, Ma. We met with President-elect Dr. Tsai Ing-wen. And as the Taiwan government changes hands during its transition period, it's important that the U.S. continues to emphasize its steadfast commitment to Taiwan, and that the players in Taiwan also make responsible decisions that are in the best interest of the people of Taiwan. A stable and prosperous Taiwan is, of course, in the best interest of the United States, and that is why I look forward to working closely with President-elect Tsai's new government to strengthen all aspects of the U.S.-Taiwan bilateral relationship. And in particular, I have a enthusiasm. I've long been an advocate for Taiwan's inclusion into the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Taiwan's economic security is just as important as its physical security. So its inclusion in the second round of the agreement will be critical to Taiwan's stability. And I know that Dr. Tsai will be willing to do the work in Taiwan needed to seriously begin a bilateral investment agreement with the United States with an eye toward TPP. And so I encourage the administration to work with the new government to create a pathway for Taiwan to be integrated into these trade deals. I'm also committed to upholding the letter and spirit of the Taiwan Relations Act, which has underpinned the relationship now for 37 years. Last year, we worked tirelessly to pressure the administration to finally follow through with the arms sales that it had promised Taiwan. The sales were finally set in motion in December. but I remain deeply skeptical about the administration's delays that needlessly drag out the arms sales process for Taiwan. So over the next year, both the U.S. and Taiwan will be working on these types of issues, and I thank Chairman Salmon again, and he's among the strongest friends of the Taiwanese people, and I also thank Congressman Brad Sherman and the other members of this committee for their engagement on the issue of Taiwan. Look forward to hearing from the witness.
Thank you. The chair recognizes ranking member, Mr. Sherman.
Yes. Chairman, thank you for holding these hearings. I know we have a classified briefing for the full committee on the same subject as these hearings, and that I know that we have votes, so we'll have a limited amount of time here in this room. Our hearts go out to the people of Taiwan, and I join with your statement and the statement of our full committee chair in sympathy for the people of Taiwan, where this disaster has cost 60 lives. And as the chairman noted, the people of Taiwan are there again and again and again when there's a disaster elsewhere in the world. While the regime in Beijing is currently engaged in a concerted effort to restrict human rights, we look only at Taiwan as a country where democracy flourishes, and we will once again see the peaceful and democratic transfer of power from one party to another. The United States has a strong interest in supporting the people of Taiwan, and those interests are enshrined in the Taiwan Relations Act, which is an important statement the U.S. to resolve that the people of Taiwan will be able to determine their own fate permanently and peacefully. The clear message should be that the United States believes in the power of dialogue, and we unequivocally support the right of the people of Taiwan to determine their own fate. In that spirit, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for bringing up the Taiwan Naval Support Act, and I thank the administration for finally delivering the friggin' frigates. While our commitment to our friends in Taiwan should not be doubted, I was very impressed to meet Dr. Tsai when she was in opposition on the trip led by Chairman Royce. And I'm confident that the people of Taiwan will rejoice when they inaugurate their first woman president, and it is a joy that I look forward to the American people experiencing just a year later. And I know the people of Taiwan will enjoy living under a woman president, and I know my constituents look forward to that joy as well. I look forward to hearing how we can help diversify the economy of Taiwan so it is less reliant on and dependent on and subject to manipulation by the People's Republic of China. I support Taiwan joining TPP if that's what the people of China want, the people of Taiwan want. What I don't support is the United States joining TPP. And I will point out that every candidate for president that's able to get more than 3% of the vote has taken a stance against TPP because they know that the American people wouldn't dream of seriously considering a candidate that supported this trade pact, which will hurt the American people so significantly, while helping the People's Republic of China establish that the rules of trade for the world are that currency manipulation is, as my people say, kosher. It is a tremendous negotiating victory for the People's Republic of China to enshrine in the rules of the road that their practices of currency manipulation are to be sacrosanct, not to mention the fact that the rules of origin are of such tremendous assistance to the People's Republic of China. Taiwan could play a useful and larger role in international organizations, sharing its expertise, sharing its experience. The United States needs to continue to advocate broader participation for Taiwan in international organizations, whether it be those organizations that, like Interpol, that keep us safe from dangerous criminals, or and that's why I've co-sponsored legislation to direct the president to develop a strategy to obtain observer status, at least for Taiwan in Interpol. Similarly, I've advocated Taiwan's participation in other international organizations. There's no reason why the fine points of international sovereignty should get involved in the practicality of Taiwan's membership in WHO. Even the People's Republic of China has it in their interest to stop criminals and stop disease, and the practical way to do that is to involve Taiwan to the maximum extent in the international organizations that are focused on human health and international crime. So I look forward to hearing from the witnesses here in this open setting, and to then adjourning for the classified briefing. And I don't know if anyone else on our side has an opening statement, but I hope the chairman would indulge at least one member on our side.
Sure, I think Mr. Shabbat has an opening statement, and then
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for
okay, then you'll do two. Okay.
thank you for holding this important hearing. Considering the recent elections in Taiwan, I want to commend the subcommittee for calling this hearing. I met with President-elect Tsai several times in the past, both here and in Taiwan, and I congratulate her and the people of Taiwan for their continued support of democracy. And I want to say that I agree with my colleague, Mr. Sherman, which sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't, but I certainly agree with his sentiment about how wonderful it is that Taiwan has its first woman president. As far as here in the U.S., I also share the sentiment of having the first woman president sworn in next year, except that unfortunately
Here in the United States?
because of New Hampshire Tuesday evening, Carly Fiorina already dropped out. So, but in any event,
Hence, there's only one way to achieve the goal that you and I both have for the United States.
so. And we may both have them this year. You never know.
Yeah. Gee, Mr. Chairman, I was just about to give Mr. Shabbat a big hug.
There you go.
yeah,
that's what
he
I
was talking
afraid-
about a brokered convention. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But getting back to Taiwan, I'd like to quickly address the restrictions on high-level visits by high-ranking Taiwanese officials, something that I've always felt was both insulting and counterproductive. Years ago, I joined a number of my colleagues, and we flew to New York City one evening to meet, after votes here, to meet with then President Chen, who's a great friend of America. We had to travel to New York because President Chen was not allowed to enter Washington, D.C. This is U.S. policy, our own self-imposed restrictions, and I've long said that this policy is nonsense and should be changed. In fact, then Foreign Minister Mark Chen, when he was in the legislature, I had met with him in Washington. He was appointed foreign minister, and a few weeks later, when we were going to get together, I had to drive to Baltimore to meet with him there because he wasn't allowed, since he was one of the four top officials, wasn't allowed to meet here in Washington, D.C. That's outrageous. It's an insult to Taiwan, and the United States should change this immediately. I also urge the administration to have direct dialogue with the democratically elected president of Taiwan. And as you well know, in international diplomacy, face-to-face meetings are an important component in ensuring a sustainable relationship. And finally, I'd like to note that I introduced H-Conres 88 last fall. This legislation reaffirms the Taiwan Relations Act and the 6 assurances together form the cornerstone of U.S. relations with Taiwan. I would urge my colleagues to join in that support. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real briefly, as a member of the committee and subcommittee, and also as the co-chair of the Taiwan caucus, this is a very important hearing, and events in the state are also very important. We all can celebrate free and democratic elections that led to the change in government from one party to another, and with the first female president of Taiwan. Both welcome developments, and to watch the free transfer of power is a very powerful model in the region, one we hope will evolve and be replicated. I agree with Mr. Shabbat that the cornerstone of our relationship is the Taiwan Relations Act and the Six Assurances. And that act includes, inter alia, a defensive military support posture on the part of the United States to ensure that peace prevails in the Taiwan Straits, and that whatever the evolution politically, it will be a peaceful one, not any other kind of kinetic option. So these are important hearings. Lots of changes going on, including, tragically, the earthquake in Tainan and the loss of life there. And I'm happy to be here and join in these hearings, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and our ranking member, Mr. Sherman, for holding them.
Thank you, Ms. Mung.
Thank you, Chairman Salmon, to our ranking member Sherman, and all our distinguished witnesses who are here today. Thank you for attending this important hearing. Before I go forward with my remarks, I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the earthquake in Taiwan this past Saturday. It was a terrible tragedy, and I know people not just in Taiwan and around the world, but my constituents in New York are very concerned as well. I know that rescue efforts are ongoing, and I too want to thank all the volunteers and people who have come forward to help. Both my colleagues and I will be keeping a close eye on progress. The purpose of today's hearing is to assess the future of U.S. Taiwan relations, particularly in light of the January 16th presidential elections, and I too want to extend my congratulations to Dr. Tsai as the first female president in Taiwan. I congratulate the people of Taiwan for their steadfast adherence to democracy, and I look forward to improving our robust relationship. And I thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Bear, if you'd like to make a quick opening statement. You good? Mr. Lowenthal, did you want to make a quick statement?
I concur. First, I thank you for being here. And I also want to extend my condolences to all those that were to the families of all those that were killed and injured by the earthquake. I want to congratulate the people of Taiwan on the successful elections. It's a welcome example of democracy in a region that at the same time has seen a great sliding on human rights. That is not true in terms of Taiwan. We've seen a gradual improvement in the relationships between in the cross-strait relations. I think it's beneficial for the security of all to have that stability, and I look forward to the hearing today. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and introduce our first panelist. Thank you so much for being here today, Ms. Thornton. We're pleased to have Ms. Susan Thornton here today, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in the State Department's Bureau of East Asian and Asian and Pacific Affairs. And we'd like to have you give your opening statement and have some questions, and then we'll excuse you and we'll seat the next panel. You understand the lighting system, not real complicated. When it goes amber, you got a minute. And when it goes red, most of the time people keep talking around here, but you should stop. Thank you. Ms. Thornton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, for having me here today and giving me the opportunity to discuss our very strong relationship with Taiwan. The story of Taiwan is, of course, an impressive one. People on Taiwan have built a prosperous, free, and orderly society with strong institutions worthy of emulation and envy. And before I go any further, I would also like to offer my sincere condolences to everyone in Taiwan that was affected by the recent earthquake, especially the families of those who were injured or lost their lives. The American people stand with the people on Taiwan during this difficult time. Last month's free and fair elections were yet another victory for Taiwan's vibrant democracy. These elections not only represent Taiwan's third peaceful transition of presidential power and the first transfer of power in its legislature, but as has been already remarked, will also lead to the inauguration of Taiwan's first female president. In this administration, we have worked to strengthen and deepen the bonds between the people of the United States and Taiwan, to build a comprehensive, durable, and mutually beneficial partnership. As one of Taiwan's strongest partners, we are working side by side to increase our mutual economic prosperity, tackle global challenges, and ensure effective security to support continued stability and dynamism for Taiwan and the region. On trade issues, Taiwan has developed a well-earned reputation for having a diversified economy that has built its prosperity on the openness of the global trade system. Taiwan has grown to become our 9th largest trading partner and our 7th largest destination for agricultural exports. In 2015, our two-way trade in goods with Taiwan reached $66 billion, up 4.5% in just the last 2 years. The United States has also moved up to be Taiwan's 2nd largest trading partner in the last year. Aside from these big business links, people-to-people ties between the United States and Taiwan also continue to grow. Travel for business and pleasure from Taiwan to the United States jumped 35% in 2013 alone, after Taiwan became a member of the U.S. Visa Waiver Program in November 2012. The United States remains committed to supporting Taiwan's confidence and dignity through increased participation in the international community and through enhanced security. We continue to support Taiwan's membership in organizations that do not require statehood and to urge meaningful participation in those that do. At a time when pressure to squeeze Taiwan out of international organizations is growing, we are finding new ways for Taiwan to earn the dignity and respect that its contributions to global challenges merit. These include new innovations, such as the establishment of our Global Cooperation and Training Framework. The GCTF is a vehicle for the United States to help showcase Taiwan's strengths and expertise by making it a hub for helping other countries to address global and regional concerns. At the same time, we remain just as committed to Taiwan's meaningful participation in organizations like Interpol, ICAO, WHO, and the UN Climate Framework. We will continue to match Taiwan's growing capacity to serve the international community with equally innovative approaches to enabling and highlighting Taiwan's contributions. On the security front, the United States makes available to Taiwan defense articles and services necessary for Taiwan to maintain a sufficient self-defense, which is consistent with our responsibilities under the Taiwan Relations Act. During the Obama administration, we have notified Congress of over $14 billion in arms sales to Taiwan, including a sale of $1.8 billion that was notified in December last year. Our efforts at supporting Taiwan's self-defense capabilities extend beyond arms sales, however. We also support Taiwan's capacity-building efforts through visits, maintenance programs, and exchanges. Due in part to these stepped-up contacts and strong U.S. partnership, Taipei has gained more confidence in its engagements with Beijing. In recent years, the two sides have pursued constructive dialogue to reach agreements on economic and people-to-people exchanges that promote peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Last year in November, we welcomed the meeting between leaders on both sides of the Taiwan Strait and the historic improvement in cross-strait relations that it symbolized. The United States remains committed to our One China policy, based on the 3 joint communiques and the Taiwan Relations Act, a policy that has remained consistent over several decades in many administrations. We will continue to call on both sides of the strait to engage in dialogue on the basis of dignity and respect after Taiwan's new administration takes office in May. In conclusion, we have developed a vital partnership with Taiwan that is filled with many opportunities for cooperation in the future. We are committed to ensuring that this relationship will continue to thrive as we find new ways to deepen our unofficial ties. The innovative spirit, democratic dynamism, and courageous vision of the people on Taiwan make us proud to be their friend and partner. Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I'd like to thank you again for inviting me here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Thornton. Regarding the recent earthquake, what kind of assistance are we planning to offer them as they look to find missing people or rebuild?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for that question. We have already, in the process of last weekend's earthquake, received a declaration of disaster from the authorities on Taiwan, and have responded to that with a contribution that we're making through the Taiwan Red Cross that will go to help the families of those affected by the earthquake. We have also had a member of our Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance regional team fly to Tainan to inspect the work that was ongoing and to keep coordination with people in the Taiwan authorities to see if there is any additional assistance that would be needed. So far, the judgment has been made that the Taiwan rescue authorities are fully capable of conducting the on-site rescue, but we're maintaining close contact with them.
Thank you. In your opening statement at the close, you were reaffirming our commitment to the One China policy as spelled out in the 3 communiques and the Taiwan Relations Act. And I really appreciate that. I think that's valuable. Let me just quote right after Secretary of State John Kerry had his first meeting with his Chinese counterpart, the foreign minister, after the elections. He said this to reporters: "Let me just say, with respect to one of the issues that the foreign minister raised on Taiwan, that since they've just had an election and a new party has won, the United States does reaffirm the 3 communiques which have been the basis of our policy. We remain committed to a One China policy, but we encourage cross-strait dialogue for resolution of that issue." Now, in his comments, he didn't mention the Taiwan Relations Act, that our One China policy is not just based on the 3 communiques, but also the Taiwan Relations Act, as you aptly pointed out. The Taiwan Relations Act states that it is U.S. policy to consider any effort to determine the future of Taiwan by other than peaceful means a threat to the peace and security of the Western Pacific area and a grave concern to the United States. How significant, if at all, do you consider the omission to have been, and what, if any, are the implications?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would say that Secretary Kerry, in speaking at the press conference, if he omitted the mention of the Taiwan Relations Act in that construct, it was certainly unintentional. We, as a matter of constant practice when describing our One China policy, always try to pair the adherence to the 3 joint communiques with our strong commitment to the Taiwan Relations Act as a cornerstone of our policy, and as really the framework within which we conduct our unofficial relationship with Taiwan. Of course, it also provides for the establishment of the American Institute in Taiwan, which provides for a cadre of experts both in Taiwan and here in Washington to pursue this relationship with a laser focus on trying to expand our cooperation. So I want to assure you that Secretary Kerry's omission, if it happened, was completely inadvertent. We've seen President Obama standing next to President Xi at least twice since I've been in this job at a press conference mention the Taiwan's Relations Act. So I know that it's firmly part of our...
And we wanted to give you the opportunity to make sure that that was part of the package, that's a strong commitment, and that's a strong part of our policy. After President Tsai got elected, she said that maintaining the status quo is her commitment to the people of Taiwan regarding the cross-strait relations and the international community, and there won't be provocation and there won't be surprises. Meanwhile, directly after the election, China broadcast images of archived live-fire military drills. How confident are you, if at all, that the DPP and the Chinese leadership have workable communication channels that might help them avoid misunderstandings and manage the tensions?
Thank you very much for that very important question. As you know, in the lead up to the elections, the United States hosted both of the major presidential candidates, and in that respect, we were able to have a very good conversation with Dr. Tsai about her plans for her administration, about her positions on things like cross-strait negotiations, and she reaffirmed for us that she is committed to continuing the status quo, that she understands the obligation to continue to pursue a policy that will enable cross-strait peace and stability, and that she intends to work with the authorities in Beijing to try to continue in the manner under which President Ma Ying-jeou has managed to pursue cross-strait relations. We also have been, of course, in touch with Chinese officials. As you noted, Secretary Kerry was there just recently meeting with the foreign minister and also with President Xi Jinping. The week before that, Deputy Secretary Tony Blinken was also in China meeting with his counterparts. And we had a chance in those discussions also to make our very strong desire to see a continuation of cross-strait stability, but also cross-strait exchanges continue. We, in those exchanges, counseled restraint, creativity, flexibility in working with the new administration in Taiwan to come up with a basis upon which to continue those negotiations. And they indicated that they were looking to see what Dr. Tsai was going to propose in that regard. So I'm hopeful that they will be able to come up with such a basis for continuing those exchanges. I think there is a will on both sides to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman.
With the notable exception of our own State Department, every foreign ministry I've talked to, almost everyone, has said that their number one goal is trade and exports. We have a persistent double-digit in billions trade deficit with Taiwan. What has the State Department done? What have you personally done to create a circumstance where we're running a trade surplus with Taiwan? At least one that will, a surplus for enough years so that our trade relationship this century will be at a balance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Congressman, for that question. I hope that the State Department has not left you with a misimpression that we're not serious about
I
promoting
will relate to you
trade.
something that happened in this subcommittee. The person who, and I'll mention his name to you privately, probably is the most respected ambassador we've had in Asia, sat there and said that when he was the ambassador to South Korea, he helped America by putting out on the lawn, and he listed a number of cars that he thought were made in America. And one of the cars he was promoting was 99% made in Germany. It had an American nameplate on it. And this was someone who hadn't made a stupid mistake in 20 years. Anybody who actually cared about promoting our exports would know whether the car they were trying to get South Koreans to buy was built in America or just labeled in America. But when you don't care, you know, little things fall through the cracks. So yes, indeed, I have a belief that the state. So what have you done? When are we going to get a trade surplus with Taiwan?
Thank you. Having many years ago worked on auto negotiations with the South Koreans, I can well appreciate where you're coming from. But turning to Taiwan, one of the, I talked a bit in my opening statement about our focus with Taiwan on expanding our economic ties. We work with
I will
Taiwan.
point out, almost always when I talk about the State Department of Economic Ties, they're as interested in creating more imports as more exports, and I've had State Department officials testify that the trade deficit isn't a problem for American families, and that in fact expanding imports is just as wonderful as expanding exports. So please don't talk about trade ties, talk about exports.
Okay, the other thing that the Taiwans have been doing in recent years that we've seen is significant inbound to the United States investment, creating a lot of U.S. jobs here by building manufacturing plants, by creating ties with technology companies in California, et cetera. But we work on expanding market access for U.S. exports to Taiwan through our Trade and Investment Framework Agreement with Taiwan. This is a ongoing, intensive dialogue that we have to try to,
So we have
break
this
down-
intensive dialogue, but we're failing every year. Every year we run a trade deficit. Do you know why we're failing? Do you think of it as failure, or is it success to run a trade deficit?
No, I mean, this is a constant, ongoing problem that we're working on. We're working every year to try to break down additional barriers. We're working on, for example, this last round in October that Deputy USTR Hollyman led in Taiwan. We made some progress on IPR issues that had been posing market barriers to some U.S. exports. We made some progress on pharmaceutical market access. So, on financial services access.
I'm going to reclaim my time. I mean, we're working hard. We're making progress. We're failing every year, and we do not have a target date that you can reveal as to when we'll reach a trade balance. We'll continue to work hard. We'll continue to fail. What additional weapons systems has Taiwan requested an opportunity to buy in the United States? This is both in the interest of preserving the rights of the Taiwanese people. I know it's juxtaposed with my question about a trade deficit. It doesn't hurt there either. What have they asked for that we have not greenlighted yet?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question.
Including what they've asked for informally, and you've told them not to ask for formally.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned in my statement, we have sold over $14 billion worth of arms to Taiwan in this administration to date. We are, of course, making available to Taiwan those articles that are necessary for its self-defense. So we do that in close consultation with the Taiwans themselves, and try to base proposals for sales and requests on things that
I know all that. Can you answer the question? What
well,
are they
we
asking
don't
for,
comment
formally or
actually,
informally?
yeah, I mean, I can't really comment on ongoing.
Will the classified briefing tell me this, or will the process of not letting me know be consistent both for
I'd be happy to try
public
to
and private?
address in more detail in the classified
I
briefing,
look-
but we
I
don't
look forward-
generally talk about things that are under
Okay,
under
but
process.
how are we doing on the F-16s, the minesweepers? I believe my time has expired, but those are the. I got an answer from my staff. I hope to get an answer from you. Thank you. Bye.
Mr. Royce, Chairman Royce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, one of the issues that I've become concerned about over time is this issue of the lack of regularity or consistency in the discussions between U.S. and Taiwan on the Taiwan Relations Act requirements to provide for the articles for Taiwan's defense needs. I had the legislation to reaffirm the act that passed the House and transfer the 4 guided missile frigates to Taiwan. And I've been down on some of those frigates, one of them, to see it outfitted. And so we're moving forward. But there isn't any consistency to this dialogue. And under the act, I would interpret it as sort of requiring that. So I would urge the administration to look at that. But there's a couple aspects of this. When you look at cyber attacks, no country is more targeted than Taiwan. And so there is an area also where the United States, I think, has a certain responsibility to assist in helping Taiwan deter these cyber attacks. I just would give you an opportunity to comment on that if you want. And then I know on the discussion to support Taiwan's indigenous submarine program with the Navy, is there a plan to allow the U.S. Navy and defense industries here to support Taiwan's indigenous program there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess what I would mention with regard to the ongoing conversations in the defense area, I mean, we have more than doubled the number of sort of working level contacts that we have with Taiwan in this space. We also have, under the Obama administration which is coincident, of course, with the administration of Ma Ying-jeou in Taiwan, we have also increased markedly the number of high-level exchanges that we've had back and forth. On the defense sector in particular, I think I would prefer to respond to your questions in detail in the closed session, but let me assure you that we are working with Taiwan very closely on all of the issues that you raised.
And the F-16 issue that Mr. Sherman also raised, I think, is also of concern. One of the objectives that I think we've all had who've looked at Taiwan's economic strength is that its inclusion in TPP would allow Taiwan greater diversification in terms of its exports. Out of Kaohsiung and Tainan, you see what they produce, and also would allow for greater imports around the Pacific Rim. And also, obviously, if Taiwan gets a seat at the table for the second round, it could also help Taiwan protect its long-term interests should we do a transatlantic agreement with Europe, because then it could be folded in eventually if it's folded into the Pacific Rim. I assume the long-term goal here, as I understand it, is an agreement with very high standards. And a high standard agreement serves the interests of the United States. There's really two different competing theories on liberalized trade. One theory, for those who believe in trade, but one theory is that you would try to drive policies with free trade and no standards. The United States doesn't benefit under that. We benefit under the rule of law, the establishment of the rule of law. And Taiwan is advantaged by a high standard agreement. Increasingly, as we travel, and I think we've had 4 trips of our delegation to Asia in the last 3 years, we hear this feedback across Southeast Asia and East Asia that, somebody needs to be pushing this concept of very high standards on intellectual property protections and all of indigenous innovation, all these issues that we're mutually concerned about and that the Europeans are also concerned about. And that if we get a major transatlantic and Pacific Rim agreement, we will have the ability to enforce that. But if Taiwan doesn't have that seat at the table and doesn't get to diversify its imports and exports, then I think this would be problematic. And that's why I keep encouraging our administration and the government to move forward on getting the base bilateral investment agreement done. How do things look on that front?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We do know, of course, that Taiwan has expressed interest in joining high standards trade agreements, regional agreements, in part because it's so good at enforcing and holds itself up to high rule of law standards. Also because of the concern that they have about diversification of their economy and wanting to ensure that they're integrated into the region, and also that they expand their network of trading partners so they don't become over-dependent on one particular trading partner. We certainly support that objective, generally that strategic objective that they have. As far as sort of our working with them, what we've said is that we want to work with them to get them ready to accede to a high standards trade and investment agreement in the future. And that's what we've been doing through the Trade and Investment Framework Agreement is they have already recognized that they have certain structural changes that they need to make in order to move in that direction. And we have told them that we will be happy to help them with that. First by working on some of the structural and market access barriers that they already have. They're going to be an impediment to them joining these high standards trade agreements, and then further down the road, helping them to prepare for that.
Thank you, Ms. Thornton. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me begin by, besides welcoming you, Ms. Thornton, agreeing with Chairman Royce, we need a high standard, liberalized trade regime, and I would add, and I know the Chairman would agree, 3 more words, enforceable and enforced. Because only then is free trade credible here at home and abroad. But in my view, there's no question that our helping to set those high standards is far preferable to the alternative in the Trans-Pacific region, and I certainly look forward to supporting the agreement. Taiwan, Ms. Thornton, should it be, if it asks, should it be incarnated into the TPP?
Well,
What's the U.S. position?
yeah, thank
And could you speak into the mic a little?
Yeah, I
Thanks.
guess that's, I'm trying to, yeah. So, I mean, our position has been to welcome Taiwan's interest in the TPP, and as I mentioned in response to the chairman's question, to let them know that they have a number of things that they need to do to prepare and get ready to accede to a high standards trade agreement, and that we are willing to work with them on sort of moving ahead on reforms that they need to make in order to be ready and make themselves an attractive partner for other members in those high standards.
But what I hear you saying is, given its status, the U.S. position is not to exclude its potential membership in the TPP.
That is not our position, correct?
Wow, okay. You would agree that the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979 codifies the relationship with Taiwan post-recognition of China. And included in that codification is a defensive military support framework, correct? U.S. is committed to providing defensive military
Yes.
support, correct?
Well, it's very clear in the TRA, but yes, we are committed to providing defensive articles to maintain Taiwan's self-defense efficiency.
Now, Taiwan has requested, among other items, minesweeping capability, F-16 combat aircraft, diesel submarines, and frigates, which we are providing. How long ago did Taiwan make those defensive military requests to the United States government?
I'm going to have to defer, I think, this to the closed session.
No,
Sorry.
it's a matter of public record, Ms. Thornton. It's not a matter of closed anything. When, for the record, did Taiwan ask for that equipment? There's nothing classified about it. Been in the newspapers. And by the way, that hearing's been canceled. So you can't, I'm not going to let you do that. I mean, I wouldn't ask you a classified question. It's not classified. Matter of public record.
There are stories in the media about things that Taiwan desires to procure from the United States, but
The question
as
was,
far
when
as-
did they first request this equipment?
to my knowledge, some of these things have not been requested.
Evasive,
formally.
Ms. Thornton. Did Taiwan, let's pick one. How long ago did Taiwan, because we do know this one, ask for diesel submarines? Could the clock, Mr. Chairman,
April
could I just
2000?
ask the indulgence of the chair while apparently the witnesses have to consult?
So, yes, my assist from the rear says that we announced in April 2001 that we were going to cooperate with Taiwan on developing a plan for diesel submarines.
Thank you. Okay. 15 years ago. Why has it taken 15 years to adjudicate that request? One way or the other? Kind of a long time, wouldn't you think?
It is a long time, and we've been working on it for 15 years, and we're continuing to work on it today.
Oh, well, we're all reassured, Ms. Thornton. Well, let me just say, for members of Congress, I think, on both sides of the aisle, it does raise questions about who's making U.S. policy and who's writing the answers to legitimate defensive military requests from the government of Taiwan pursuant to a statute that you yourself just acknowledged does indeed undergird the relationship, and included in that statute is a codification of our support for defensive military equipment to ensure that whatever the ultimate resolution is in the Taiwan Strait is a peaceful one. And I think you would you not agree that a 15-year wait for an answer on any item on that list seems to be an awfully long time?
I certainly agree that it's a long time, but I'll just say that it is complicated and that I could go into more detail in the closed session if we ever have that opportunity.
I appreciate that, but we do understand its complication. But you know, the King of Siam used to say, "It's a puzzlement." But 15 years, my goodness. Okay, final question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. What is the U.S. position with respect to Taiwan being accepted into international organizations? Do we support that bid?
Yeah, we support Taiwan's membership in international organizations where statehood is not a requirement for membership, and we support their active participation in organizations where they do require statehood for membership.
Do we support Taiwan's bid to be a member of Interpol?
We support Taiwan's active participation in Interpol, and we have been working on
Status
that.
to be determined.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it. Because obviously that's one that's very practical, irrespective of status,
Absolutely.
and we want more cooperation. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the time.
Mr. Shabin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Thornton, let me follow up on my colleague from the Commonwealth of Virginia, Mr. Connolly, on the submarine and defense issues in general. As a former chairman of this committee and as one of the co-founders of the Congressional Taiwan Caucus and a longtime friend of Taiwan, my recollection is with respect to the submarines in particular, one of the problems is nobody makes diesel submarines anymore that we know. I think there was some talk about maybe the French could still do it, but that was one of the problems, nuclear submarines, but in order, because of the expense, the fact that you don't necessarily need the nuclear submarines in that part of the world, et cetera, that diesel, in fact, I saw I guess they have a World War II era submarine there. I think it was down at the naval base in Kaohsiung, I believe, is where I saw that. I'm seeing a few nodding of heads in the audience with folks that know a lot more about this than I do. But in any event, I know that was one of the problems. But here's my question to you about this whole thing. You know, the planes and the anti-missile system and the submarines, improving the defensive abilities of Taiwan in case the in case the PRC did decide to get even more belligerent and hostile than they have been over the last couple of decades. It's critical that Taiwan does strengthen their military and their defenses. But one of the problems, we had a hard time getting this stuff through here, but when we finally did, we ran into a roadblock with Taiwan, because even though you had a DPP president, President Chen Shui-bian, who wanted to move ahead with this, you've had KMT, who has controlled the legislature, since martial law, I believe. Is that correct? And Speaker Wong, I think, would try to get it through the legislature and just couldn't get it. When we weren't willing to act, they wanted it. And when we finally got around to it, then they couldn't get it through there. And I'm seeing some nod from some of your assistant folks there too. So is that one of the issues that we faced? And then I guess the real question is this. We just had a pretty important election in Taiwan recently, and the DPP now is not only going to have the presidency, but they're also going to control the legislative arm for the first time ever. Well, so is there maybe some light at the end of the tunnel in actually getting this defense that Taiwan so desperately needs and actually make it happen? Do you want to comment on it?
Yeah, no, that's excellent comments, and thank you for the question. We certainly work very closely with the Taiwan side to make sure that the capabilities that we're providing are augmenting its asymmetric and innovative security approach. And so within that, we have to look at different systems and see which things are going to make the most sense for what Taiwan needs. It is true that the expenditures that they have to dedicate to these capabilities do have to be factored in on the Taiwan side. And I'll just note that $14 billion in arms sales over the last several years is a considerable amount to absorb and to fund through their defense budget. Of course, Taiwan has also recently gone to an all-volunteer force, which has also expanded its personnel costs and caused it to need to do some restructuring of its budget. So,
If I could cut you off there for just a moment, I've only got 1 minute left. I had two more things I wanted to ask you real quickly. So if I could get a quick response. Can you think of any other countries that we deal with, that we bar their top 4 leaders from coming to our capital, Washington, D.C.?
I'm not sure, but I just want to point out on that note that we have actually, we have presidential transits for the safety, dignity, comfort, and security of the traveler.
Right, they can
We
go to
had the
San Francisco, they can go to New York.
Vice Premier in California earlier this
President
year.
Tai isn't going to be able to come here to Washington, D.C. unless we change our policy. Is that correct?
That has been the policy to
We ought to change our policy. And then finally, I got 10 seconds left. President Chen Shui-bian was finally released about a year ago on medical parole. How's he doing?
As far as I understand, he's doing well, and he's still on medical parole, as far as I know.
Thank you very much. I yield back my time.
Ms. Thornton, there is a sense that part of the momentum towards the President-elect Tsai's election was a response to a slowing of Taiwan's economy, particularly with exports and imports. President-elect Tsai has specifically mentioned plans to have a closer economic relationship with the United States. However, U.S. businesses in Taiwan report facing inadequate or outdated laws, government bureaucracy, inconsistent regulatory interpretations, and a lack of regulatory transparency, etc., as barriers to further economic development. What is your sense of the political will of President-elect Tsai and the newly elected DPP majority in the Legislative Yuan to address these issues directly?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. In our conversations with Dr. Tsai and with her team, it is my sense that this is an area that she is very well aware of, that is inhibiting Taiwan's economic potential, and that she is looking to move as a priority once she takes office to try to address. And we have been very keen to work with her in the new administration, again through our Trade and Investment Framework Agreement process, which her team is well aware of and has been briefed on, to try to move forward on some of the intractable market access barriers that we've seen in Taiwan, and also some of these regulatory problems that do create a lot of constraints for our businesses and our potential investors.
Thank you. And my second question on a different topic, in relation to the South China Sea, how do recent reports of possible joint naval patrols by the U.S. and India in the South China Sea work into the U.S.'s priority to de-escalate tensions there?
Yeah, I can't really comment on the story about the joint patrols between the U.S. and India. As far as I'm aware, there's no concrete plan in that regard, but certainly the U.S. policy for the South China Sea is to call on all of the claimants and regional players to try to reduce tensions, to preserve freedom of navigation and overflight, and to try to resolve disputes peacefully and conduct themselves in accordance with the rule of law. And I don't think that there's our presence in that part of the world has been long-standing. It's a part of our security presence in that region, which has helped maintain peace and stability in Asia for ever since the end of the Second World War, and I think we don't see any problem with patrols or other things that are in keeping with freedom of flight and freedom of navigation.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Mung. That will conclude our panel. First panel. We'll have the second panel be seated. I just also wanted to say that we are trying to reschedule the classified briefing because we're going to have votes called in about 15 minutes. We might just get through the testimony of the second panel when we get called for votes. But thank you so much, Ms. Thornton, for coming, and thank you for all your attention. So we'll seat the next panel now.
How's it going?
How are you? We got a new.
Pause.
I think we'll go ahead and move on with introductions. I know we're kind of clearing the room out, but we want to make sure we get your testimony before we have to go vote. We're really pleased to be joined today by three excellent panelists. First, Mr. Randall Shriver, President and CEO of the Project 2049 Institute. Ms. Bonnie Glazer, good to see you again, Senior Advisor for Asia and Director of the China Power Project and Center for Strategic and International Studies. And Dr. Shelley Rigger of Davidson University's Political Science Department. We're really grateful for these witnesses joining us today that lend their expertise, and we'll start with you, Mr. Shriver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very much appreciate the invitation, and I appreciate being seated alongside Dr. Rigger and Ms. Glazer, who I have enormous respect for as well. I want to join others who express condolences and thoughts and prayers. Certainly it's a difficult time, and we wish them well in the recovery efforts. It's a very timely hearing, has been noted due to the recent election, and I think it's appropriate that we acknowledge the significance of this event. It's a young democracy. They're under tremendous pressure. So just carrying out a free and fair election is something worthy of our praise. In your instructions, you asked me to speak specifically about economic and trade issues, which I will do. Before doing that, I think it's also appropriate to note President Ma and the fact that he's coming to the end of his tenure. He's been a great friend to the United States, has done a terrific job promoting peace and stability in the region. I think often not given credit for his South China Sea Peace Initiative, the East China Sea Peace Initiative. So as we move into a new administration, we should reflect on his accomplishments. Dr. Tsai is somebody who's very experienced on trade matters. She herself has been a trade negotiator, and I think she campaigned on economic reform and promoting trade. I think that gives us opportunities that we would be very smart to seize upon. As been mentioned by others, she has a keen interest in joining TPP. I'm of the view that we should not only welcome that interest, but be very clear that we want Taiwan in a second round, should there be one, and I hope there is, and that we will work with them to identify a clear pathway to entry. I listened carefully to the administration statement that we welcome their interests. I believe we should welcome more than their interest. I think we should work with them to have a concrete path to inclusion in TPP. I agree with previous comments made about the investment environment and the need for a bilateral investment agreement. Taiwan is a significant investor in the United States, and of course vice versa. That can be strengthened. There are too many barriers still in place, so we should keep these delegations going, but more to the point, work through the various fora to try to create a better environment for mutual investment. I think there are other areas of our economic relationship that could also be strengthened. I think defense industrial cooperation is something we should consider. There were, I think, some very good questions about the submarine program. Why 15 years? Certainly, if Taiwan does determine to go the path of an indigenous diesel-electric submarine, there are opportunities for our industry to get involved in that, and I think the administration could send clear signals that we welcome that kind of defense industrial cooperation, and it could really give a boost to this program, and maybe it won't be another 15 years until we see a submarine there in Taiwan. I think in the S&T area as well, this has been one of the past areas of success. Taiwan is a very innovative country. They are a global leader in patents. And to use an overused phrase, there are a lot of win-win opportunities, I think, if we really strengthen our S&T cooperation, not only in defense, but beyond that into the high-tech sector. This is all going to unfold under an environment where I expect there to be increasing pressure, not only military pressure and the missiles that we're all aware of, but there are rumors that China is preparing for a more coercive path, cutting back tourists, cutting back flights, et cetera. We can do these things irrespective of the positions China takes, but of course it becomes more challenging, at least politically and diplomatically, to do that in the face of more pressure. But I think we have to remember to keep the onus on Beijing. They're the ones who have a policy that's failing. They're the ones that have the military posture opposite Taiwan, threatening them and intimidating the people there. And they are the ones that also need to show some flexibility. So people regard this election as a potential inflection point, but we need to remember that the real core of the problem is Beijing's intransigence and the positions that they're taking. So just to conclude very briefly, I think there are 5 things. I think TPP in a very clear path is important. I think more on bilateral investment to include not only the bilateral agreement, but the promotion of these delegations. I think on the defense side, there's much more that can be done, and I think several of the systems were mentioned, F-16s, minesweepers, but I have a particular interest in the submarine program because I think there's an opportunity for defense industrial cooperation. The S&T area as a 4th area I think is very promising. And then finally, in our diplomacy, keep some balance. This election is one of the reasons we're here talking. But if you pull that thread too far, some people might be oriented towards blaming democracy or blaming Taiwan for the instability. The problem is in Beijing, and we need to keep that in mind as we go forward and continue to put our emphasis on their need to de-escalate, to demilitarize, and to have some flexibility. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Glazer.
Thank you, Chairman Salmon, Ranking Member Sherman, and distinguished members of the committee. I too would like to offer my thoughts and prayers to the people of Taiwan as they recover from this earthquake. The United States has a deep and abiding interest in the preservation of Taiwan's security and democracy. The Taiwan Relations Act remains an important touchstone for Congress, for policymakers in the executive branch. And to ensure Taiwan's security, the U.S. government must actively seek to use all the tools of U.S. policy and implement not only the letter, but also the spirit and the intentions behind the TRA. I've been asked to address my remarks to Taiwan's security, and the threats to Taiwan's security are numerous and they are growing. Efforts to sustain the island's economic prosperity, which is a critically important component of national security, are facing challenges. Taiwan is largely excluded from the Asia-Pacific regional economic integration process. The U.S. can and should do more to advocate for Taiwan's increased participation in international organizations, and especially those that would enhance the safety and welfare of Taiwan citizens. And I commend Chairman Salmon for introducing the legislation that urges the Obama administration to support Taiwan's efforts to obtain observer status in Interpol, from which it was expelled in 1984. Without question, the greatest and most direct threat to Taiwan's security is, of course, posed by the Chinese military. U.S. security assistance, including but not limited to arms sales to Taiwan, is vital to deter China from coercing or attacking Taiwan and to enable Taiwan's armed forces to fight effectively in all possible contingencies. Cooperation with China presents important opportunities for the United States, for example, to reverse global warming and prevent nuclear proliferation. And the U.S., of course, should seek to work with Beijing to address regional and global challenges where possible. However, it is harmful to American interests to be so eager for Chinese cooperation that it appears willing to sacrifice Taiwan for better U.S.-China ties. Such an approach sends the wrong signal to Beijing. It creates anxiety in Taiwan, and it fosters doubt throughout the region about America's willingness to withstand Chinese pressure in support of its commitments. The KMT defeat and the election of Tsai Ing-wen have created some uncertainty about the future of cross-strait relations. The mainland insists that Tsai Ing-wen accept its definition of the existing political foundation, which is essentially opposition to Taiwan independence and support of the 1992 consensus. Tsai Ing-wen has recently defined this existing political foundation differently. For her, it includes the historical fact of the 1992 talks, the prevailing Republic of China constitutional order, the accumulated outcome of more than 20 years of cross-strait interaction, and importantly, democratic principles and the will of the Taiwanese people. The U.S. government can play a role, I believe, to help narrow the gap between mainland China and Taiwan by encouraging each side to provide assurances to the other to assuage their respective fears. The U.S. should strongly discourage Beijing from using coercive measures to pressure Tsai and the DPP to concede to its demands. Punitive actions by China could compel Tsai Ing-wen to respond and perhaps result in a negative spiral that could produce a cross-strait setback and even a crisis. Beijing appears to be deliberating how to respond to the DPP's return to power in Taiwan. I think that Xi Jinping has not yet made a decision, but if he adopts a more coercive and even aggressive approach to Taiwan, the U.S. response will be widely viewed as an indicator of the credibility of American commitments. And not only Japan, but also countries in Southeast Asia would be alarmed if Washington fails to provide backing to Taiwan in the face of Chinese coercion or aggression. For more than 2 decades, the U.S. has insisted that decisions about Taiwan's future must have the assent of the people of Taiwan in a democratic manner. And public opinion polls show that a majority of the people of Taiwan, yes, they favor talks with mainland China, but dwindling numbers favor reunification. In 2015, a record low of 9.1% of respondents in Taiwan favored unification either now or in the future. And this polling data, combined with the outcome of the election, suggests that there could be a realignment of political forces and attitudes underway in Taiwan. And it is imperative that the U.S. help Taiwan to preserve the autonomy that its people desire and ensure that the differences between Taipei and Beijing be managed peacefully. Thank you.
Dr. Rigger.
Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity. Taiwan's January elections were a watershed in the island's democratic development. For the first time, the Kuomintang lost control of both branches of the national government. The DPP has won national elections only twice before, when Chen Shui-bian was elected president in 2000 and 2004. And many in Washington remember the Chen presidency as a time of turbulence. Chen began his presidency with efforts to reach out to Beijing and to the KMT, but both the PRC and the KMT stonewalled him, and he eventually gave up on seeking their cooperation and began pursuing an agenda aimed more at pleasing his core supporters. Nonetheless, the Chen presidency left many voters feeling disillusioned, and that helped give the KMT's Ma Ying-jeou an easy win in 2008. Under Ma, the Taiwan Strait has been relatively calm. Taiwan has signed almost 24 economic agreements with the PRC, while cross-strait trade, investment, and people-to-people flows have increased to unprecedented levels. So now that the DPP is about to return to power, people are asking whether we are about to enter another era of tension in the Taiwan Strait. While I understand why these questions are being asked, I do not believe we are about to enter an era of confrontation. Under Tsai's leadership, the DPP has adopted moderate positions that align with the preferences of Taiwan's people. Throughout her campaign, she made it clear that her goal is to preserve the status quo in the Taiwan Strait. She does not intend to move Taiwan toward independence, but neither does she intend to rush headlong into Beijing's embrace, either politically or economically. So, in short, the January elections affirmed Taiwan's democracy and confirmed the fundamental rationality of Taiwan's electorate. Promoting democracy is a core interest and objective of U.S. foreign policy. During the Cold War, Taiwan's government persuaded the U.S. to overlook its authoritarian nature, but in the 70s and 80s, U.S. officials, especially members of Congress, joined with democracy activists in Taiwan to urge the KMT-led government to implement democratic reforms. Taiwan's democratization was achieved with almost no bloodshed or instability, making it an example to other nations. Supporting Taiwan's democracy is an important element of U.S. policy, therefore, and it is critical that we not confuse Taiwan's people's active defense of their democracy with troublemaking. An overwhelming majority of Taiwanese recognize that pursuing formal independence is both unnecessary and risky, but they have no interest in being absorbed into the People's Republic of China. Their goal is to remain a self-governing democratic entity while working toward peaceful and cooperative relations with their neighbors on the Chinese mainland. These goals, which are represented well, now that Tsai has been elected, the U.S. should redouble its efforts to keep those channels of communication open. U.S. policy precludes Washington from engaging in high-level official interactions with Taipei, although it seems that not everyone in this room thinks that's a good policy. But the U.S. is free under any policy to choose a less restrictive interpretation of its policy. Overly rigid adherence to the one China policy will not serve the U.S. well in a period of uncertainty and transition. The task for the U.S. in the next few years will be to support Taiwan's continued democratic development. Washington should recognize and reward the DPP-led government's moderate positions and encourage all parties to seek opportunities for cooperation and avoid confrontation. Given Taipei and Beijing's incompatible goals in some areas, a degree of tension is unavoidable. However, attentive management can prevent that tension from ripening into conflict. Thank you very much.
Thank you. When I first came to Congress in the 90s, Warren Christopher was the Secretary of State, and I remember him coming before one of our committees and testifying that our policy with China was one of, and the Taiwan Strait, was one of strategic ambiguity. I thought that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard in my life. And my understanding is that's still our policy. Is it or isn't it? Dr. Rigger, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. Yes, it is our policy, and I think part of the reason it continues to be our policy is that it has, whatever its merits on the face of it, actually served us very well for a long time. So it might not be the policy that a political scientist would design, but I don't recommend government by political scientists. So I think in practice, it has allowed the U.S. to calibrate its actions and positions toward both the PRC and Taiwan in ways that have successfully maintained the balance in the strait.
But what it's yielded is really, I don't know, idiotic policies, like when Lee Deng-hui couldn't visit his alma mater at Cornell, and we had to pass special legislation encouraging or allowing him to do so, or Taiwan virtually being kicked out of every international body, and now we have to try to assert in the name of common sense that they be allowed to participate in bodies like Interpol when we want all hands on deck to fight international terrorism and international crime and trafficking, human trafficking. It just makes sense to have all hands on deck. And why in the world would anybody in Taiwan ever want to follow up on China's offer of a peaceful reunification with a one China, two systems when they see how they hoodwink the people of Hong Kong? Universal suffrage. The folks in Hong Kong believed that claptrap that Beijing was throwing at them, that it's going to be one China, two system, when in reality the leader of Hong Kong gets picked by Beijing. Why would Taiwan ever want to yield to that? Ms. Glazer, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think that that's exactly the reason why the polls show that the people of Taiwan very few of them actually support reunification, as they observe Hong Kong, as they witness the crackdown on dissent and the squeezing of the ability of the average people on the mainland just to access internet to conduct protests, to publish their views. I think it's clear that the people in Taiwan do not want to be part of the mainland and do not support one country, two systems.
Oh, and in Taiwan, proselyting is legal. People can share their religious views freely. They have freedom of the press. Yeah, peaceful transitions from one party to the next in leadership in the president's office and in the seat of government. And they see the vast differences when you speak about your, with conviction. I guess you can believe in something as long as you don't really believe it in China, and that's the problem. If you really believe in something, then you're a fanatic, and you get imprisoned. And so, the people of Taiwan watch this stuff happening, and they're very cautious. Look, I was as concerned as anybody with some of the statements that Chen Shui-bian was making, later on in his administration. But Tsai Ing-wen has said that she intends to promote the status quo. She's not trying to upset the apple cart, but she's made it clear that her first interest and first duty is to the people of Taiwan, not to the people on mainland China. I don't think that's all that extreme. I think that's just common sense. And so as they go forward, how can we monitor, in our relations with the cross-strait, what indicators should we be monitoring for a sense of how the cross-strait relationship is being handled between China and the DPP, whether or not they're going to stonewall her like they did Chen Shui-bian? I guess that's one thing we could probably see pretty readily, but the other one is, what do you expect will happen to current formal, official contact between the two sides of the strait? Do you think there's going to be any degradation of that? Yeah.
Yes,
Pleasure.
thank you, Congressman Salmon. I think those are very important questions. As to indicators, one of the early indicators we can look at is whether the mainland is restricting tourists that are traveling to Taiwan. There are already some signs of that. This could damage Taiwan's economy. And the mainland, of course, claims some deniability. They say, oh, maybe the people of mainland just don't want to go, but we know that this is, in fact, government-controlled. I particularly worry about the possibility of Beijing trying to steal away some of Taiwan's diplomatic allies. Taiwan now has 22, and there are some countries who have indicated a desire to shift their diplomatic allegiance. So far, Beijing has respected this tacit diplomatic truce, but I think that this could put pressure on President Tsai once she is inaugurated to respond in a negative way that could lead to that downward sort of negative spiral that I talked about. As for the formal communications, I think that so far Beijing has not said publicly that they are going to cut those off, but privately there are some indications that the semi-official white glove organizations, CEF and ARATS on both sides of the strait, could be suspended, and also the communications between the Taiwan Affairs Office and the Mainland Affairs Council, where they have recently set up a hotline, and those could also be suspended. I think any suspension of communication and dialogue channels would be a very negative sign.
I'm just going to close with this and then yield to Mr. Sherman, but a position of strategic ambiguity would be when a member of Congress asks a panelist, how do you feel about Taiwan participating in the second round of the TPP? And the answer coming back, we welcome their interest in that. That's a position of strategic ambiguity out there in the ozone. A strategic clarity statement would be, yes, we welcome their involvement, their participation, not their interest, but we, like you said, Mr. Shriver, would you agree with that?
Absolutely, and I think that a lot has changed since Warren Christopher was Secretary of State, and I think the very positive developments on Taiwan should be recognized and rewarded, but also the threat posture that China poses. I think we'd be served with more clarity when it comes to defense commitments and security, and a whole host of areas, including these trade agreements and international organizations. I think ambiguity maybe had its time and place, but more clarity is probably appropriate at this juncture.
Yeah, let's just stop parsing words and say what we mean. Mr. Sherman.
I'll make a couple political science comments. First, in defense of strategic ambiguity. Donald Trump is not known for his ambiguity, yet he has spoken often in favor of not saying what he would do because that would give him in a Trump presidency more leverage in negotiations. The problem that I find with strategic ambiguity is that it means that if you're going to keep the foreign power guessing as to what our policy is, then you cannot inform the American people of what. So I think if we had a dictatorship, there would be, in the United States, it would fit with strategic ambiguity. And I don't know if that's what Mr. Trump has in mind, but he hasn't talked to me.
Hadn't talked to me either.
Also, the second political science comment is political scientists live in this world where you figure out what is the interest of the country, as if this was a game of Risk or something, where the country was a single entity determining its interests. My own belief is that countries make foreign policy decisions to respond to short-term domestic political needs. And right now, China needs nationalism to explain why a party that is no longer the vanguard of the proletariat should continue to rule in the absence of 7.5% growth. Dr. Rigger, what putting pressure on Taiwan, is that popular with Joe's six-pack in Shanghai?
It's extremely difficult for us to know what is popular with the citizens of the People's Republic of China because it is not an open information environment. What is more troubling even than that, though, is that there's a certain kind of Joe Sixpack in the mainland who is allowed to speak and is allowed to speak loudly and
well, we know that
perpetually.
Nationalism over the islets or rocks or whatever we're going to fight the World War III about in the South Pacific, that's popular nationalism. Is it consistent with popular nationalism in China to say we're going to be tough on Taiwan, or you're being tough on Chinese people? So does it fit with jingoistic popular nationalism in China to try to kick Taiwan out of an airpole?
It does, but it's impossible to understand what that really means in terms of China's long-term domestic political situation because
you need to study political science by running for office. There are no long-term political objectives. There are short-term political objectives.
Can I explain, though, what my logic is? So the problem is that in China, there are a few things that you can say out loud. Mm-hmm. And all of them are, I hate Japan, we should be more aggressive in the South China Sea, Taiwan must be reunified with the mainland. But we don't know whether people would be saying those things as loudly and energetically as they are if they could say other things. But because they can't say other things, these are the things they say.
Okay, Ms. Glazer talked a little bit about the things China can do to show its displeasure with the fact that the Taiwanese people voted for what they consider to be the wrong political party. Those all seem like little nitpicking. Is there anything China might do to Taiwan in the next year that is more significant than trying to get a Latin American country to cut off diplomatic relations or giving Taiwan the cold shoulder and stopping communication with various mainland entities? Anything?
Within the next year, probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But those small things, especially added together, can have a really profound effect on the confidence of Taiwan people and their ability to go forward strongly and to advocate for their own interests. So they do matter.
If 5 embassies closed in Taipei from countries that many Taiwanese could not find on a map, would that shake confidence?
Yes, and if 10 close, that would be half of Taiwan's
Well,
diplomatic
that's why I
partners
asked
in the
about 5.
world, and that would deeply shake people's confidence, absolutely.
There are a few islands that are so small that they would appreciate even modest aid from Taiwan, and new embassies could be opened by countries that are even harder to find on a map. Okay, what factors do you believe contributed to the DPP winning the elections and, just as significantly, the KMT's weak showing?
I think the biggest issues were domestic issues for Taiwan. Economic issues, the sense that Taiwan's economy can produce aggregate growth at a slow but reasonable rate, but that it can't produce jobs or the kinds of jobs that Taiwanese people are preparing themselves to do as they emerge from school. And it can't produce the kind of egalitarian distribution of income and wealth that Taiwanese have come to expect as the fruit of development.
Sounds like Bernie Sanders won the election.
Well, I think that the problems that Taiwan faces are not Taiwan's alone.
Okay. And what can the DPP government and Taiwan in general do to lessen its dependence on mainland China?
This is the great task facing Taiwan, to figure out the answer to this question. The DPP has published lots of white papers and statements about what they plan to do, but most of those are pretty vague and piecemeal. The best thing that Taiwan could do, I think, is to improve its accessibility to international trade and investment. Taiwan still has a lot of parts of its market and economy that are not very open, and I think that's really what we're talking about when we talk about getting ready for TPP. The international business community has been asking a long time for Taiwan to open its economy more, and I think perhaps Taiwan can make some progress there.
I've gone over time. I don't know if the other witnesses have any quick comments.
I would just make one quick comment, and that is that the mainland China has a pretty robust toolbox to use to pressure Taiwan. There's economic tools, there's preferences that they give to Taiwan businesses on the mainland, there's fish that they buy from southern Taiwan fishermen. They can cut all of these. Only 2 countries have been really permitted, and I put that in quotation marks, to negotiate bilateral free trade agreements with Taiwan. That's Singapore and New Zealand. And there are other countries that had started informal talks, those who want to begin talks, and Beijing has basically shut that down. They have diplomatic, economic influence directly on Taiwan and then indirectly through other countries. So, and then of course there's the whole toolbox of military coercion. So I think there's a lot to be concerned about.
I could add briefly on that last point. We shouldn't forget about the military piece of this, because throughout this 8-year period of peace and stability, what has China done on the military side? They've continued to build up more missiles, more capabilities, more training. They have a mock-up of the presidential palace that they're exercising against. I mean, countries that equip, train, prepare.
They have a mock-up of Taiwan's presidential palace so they can train special forces into how to go in and seize the president, or something like that?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I might point out, if we really cared about Taiwan's defense, we would just amend the law that provided most favored nation status to China and say this law is void if China takes military action against Taiwan, its ports, and its shipping. And some of us tried to do that back when we first gave permanent MFN, but it's not too late. That one, they wouldn't need the frigates if we did that.
I thank the panel. This has been very, very, very helpful. Thank you very much. One just last question. You had mentioned that there were 4 things, and I think we got 3. Would the 4th be Tibet? I mean, are they still, because every time I ever met with senior Beijing officials, the 2 things that, was like drilling on their teeth without Novocaine was Taiwan Strait and Tibet. Is that still pretty much the same thing.
Sinja.
Yeah.
So you can say anything you want to about those issues and not get in trouble. So if you want to
Yeah.
speak out, choose those topics.
Right.
That's fine.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the panel and thank the ranking member. It's been very edifying, and want to congratulate the people of Taiwan again on a wonderfully successful and peaceful election and transition that's about to happen, and also to let them know that we're with you in spirit and in every other way in relationship to rebuilding after the earthquake. So thank you very much.
I agree.
This committee is adjourned.